Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Cleaning Out the Closet. My name is Tracy. I am your host. This is a space where we share stories of addiction and recovery, but mostly in between the detox, the substance removal from your body, withdrawal. This is a place where there's no shame, you're loved unconditionally, and you are always safe and you're never alone. And so, as long as I'm breathing, I will keep bringing this to you. And just thank you for listening to this. It means the world to me. So today I have a really incredible guest that I found and stalked for a while because she's so busy, and I finally have her here, and I'm so excited for everyone to hear her story because it's different and it's not like anything I've had on the show yet. This is Pamela Brinker. She lives in Colorado. She's a licensed psychotherapist. She wrote a really incredible book that has, I think, changed so many people's lives. It's an incredible to read. And the greatest thing is that this is about being watching somebody in addiction. So not being the addict themselves, but watching it. And as a mom, this is what it was like for her. And I can say this through my own experience that watching somebody in addiction that you love, that's your child, it just you stop breathing. So thank you so much, Pamela, for being here and, for being willing to share, really hard conversations. And it's important. And thank you again for being here.
It's my pleasure, Tracy. It's really been a joy getting to know you.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same way. And so, all right. So I think I've talked a lot about mental health. I've started to really talk about mental health because for my own story, mental health is what sent me, to benzos, and that subsequently stayed on in my life for 25 years, because it wasn't properly discussed, or, nothing was said, and it just became part of what I had. I had anxiety, and then, I wanted to make that go away. So that's what I did. And so, you know, maybe just start to explain to everybody like how mental health came into your family, and even with your position and what you do for a living, like how different was that for you when it was actually in your own house?
Mm. Well, 12 years ago, my then two teenage sons' stepdad died from a grade 4 glioblastoma brain cancer.
I'm
And in their grief, they turned to alcohol and drugs as part of the answer to the pain they were trying to resolve. And as close as we were, I didn't know it. It took months. They were very secretive. And like I said, we were
How
close.
old were they at the time?
One was 13 and a half and one was 16 and a
Oh
half.
yeah, so that's brutal. It's a
Mm-hmm.
brutal age.
Yeah, it was so hard. And they bonded together through alcohol and drugs.
Right.
And so within about, I don't know, 8 months or so, I knew we had a severe problem. And it wasn't just their problem. So you asked about me. It was a family problem because I was a new single mom and still
Oh,
grieving myself and trying to be there for them and trying
right,
to stand as a tall tree and
right.
be supportive and be a light. And yet I was struggling so much myself that I remember one day saying to myself when I was walking around the house, they were both at school and I was kind of just mulling over everything saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. And it was like grace hit me later that day or sometimes shortly thereafter. And it was really a message from Cheryl Strayed from her book, Tiny Beautiful Things, when she tells parents, we don't have the luxury of despair.
No.
And that grace really came upon me and came over me. And I realized, wow, what if I chose this? What if I chose this life where my husband died and my sons are now turning to substance, and they were just substance users at the time, but within 3-4 years they became addicted to methamphetamines. And it was really partly, you asked about mental health, Tracy, it was really partly, and for our audience, partly because of mental health challenges. They both had really severe ADD.
Yeah.
And one had more of the ADD where he was distracted and hyper, so he had ADHD. That was the younger one, and the older one had the ADD where he was brilliant and off the charts verbal and bored with teachers because he would correct them and that sort of thing and just
Right.
had trouble focusing. At any rate, I think they used amphetamines partly because it helped their brains, but then
Definitely.
they went too far with it,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, yeah, in my deep compassion, I really wanted to help them. And so we got them on amphetamine. We got them on Vyvanse, which
Right.
is like Adderall, but then they immediately doubled their doses. And their doctor said, wow, you guys are really pioneers. And he didn't understand that they were already on that addiction
Yeah,
continuum.
they were, and I know that it's a huge problem. I know that all
Mhm.
of this ADHD medication is a huge problem out there. Um,
Absolutely. And I didn't realize it either. So my mistakes were so many that it's that I had
hey,
to
listen, we all
revamp.
make money. Not you. Don't do that. We're
Yeah.
all
Well, they were so many that I started realizing, oh my goodness, I've got to take in everything I've ever taught my clients and revamp it. So I had to modify stuff I taught my clients as I went for myself so
right.
that I could become more aware,
Right.
become more awake.
Yeah.
And so that's why I titled my book Conscious Bravery. Because it's the book that I wanted to read at the time that wasn't available.
Very, yeah.
I was pulling from every resource, trying to read all kinds of different books and poetry and meetings with a therapist and an acupuncturist and a chiropractor and just trying to put it all together. But I really wished that there was one resource that could truly help me. So I kind of started creating it and practicing myself, finding what worked, what didn't, to be more compassionate to my sons. I had to be more compassionate to myself.
Well, of course, because it's all the guilt and what did I do wrong, and
Mm,
shame of like I screwed up my kids, and it's like we take that on as moms. And I think
mhm,
anybody listening to this who is a mom, like, well, you understand what that means. It's not like you have a choice in the matter. It's just the way it is. This is just like
mhm.
innate feeling that we just take that on, because again, like we take a bullet for our kid, we'd step out in the middle of a road to protect our child. So, when you see them really struggling, you want to be mad. You want to be like, what's wrong with you? But that's not what they need. They need
So
support.
true.
They need
So
support.
true.
And they need to
Yeah.
be believed in, like you can't give up as much as you want to because they don't really want you to.
It's so true. Everything you're saying, I feel, and I hope our listeners feel this way too, applies to both those of us who walk alongside someone in the wilderness of addiction or mental health challenges, and those of us who struggle with substance use disorder ourselves or addiction, whatever you want to call it. Because the same truths apply. We really have to decide that we want to have compassion for ourselves, that we prefer to feel better rather than worse. Because I
Right.
don't know about you, but a lot of my clients during that time, I started noticing how many of my clients were saying to me, I just feel bad all the time, every week. And they would just sing kind of the same song to themselves. And I would say, what do you want to feel? Like
Right.
8 months from now, what do you want to feel?
Right.
And then they would say, I want to feel more joy. I want to feel more of a foundation of contentment. And then we'd walk it back to, okay, well, what do you need to do in 4 months, in 2 months, this month? What are you ready to do today? What small little thing? And I learned to live that way myself
Yeah.
because
You
it's
have,
all you can do
it's
is
all you
one
can do.
moment at a time. So
Yeah, and we want to fix the world for our kids. Unfortunately, that is like again our, you know, that's just our innate feeling of wanting to fix everything for them, but we end up actually not really fixing anything for them. And they want to be able to do it too, even though they don't think they can. And with kids and your boys was really struggling and grieving. Their
mhm,
life was different, completely changed. So
mhm.
and that's a lot. And so once you realize that they were using meth, that was it to a point where they had to be in a hospital for it? Were they both using the same thing? Was it this at the same time? How did you address that with them? Like, and telling them, hey, listen, I know what's going on.
It happened gradually.
Yeah.
Initially, it was a combination of using the Vyvanse they were prescribed and finding Adderall to supplement that, and then also using LSD and Molly and other kinds of things
Oh,
along
brother.
with alcohol. So they had a whole, poly substance use thing going on. And it was really insidious because it would get better and then worse. And I would notice things and I'd say, what's going on? Let's talk. And then they'd say, I just really want to talk to a therapist or, you know, um,
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've learned all the kids in the way that the world is now. I think they've learned very well how to hide things, and if you're not really paying very close attention, you miss things.
Mhm.
And I,
But in regard to your answer, missing things. So we started doing family work because
Mhm.
I realized I was missing things.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that our whole family needed to be restructured. So I would offer our listeners that there's never just one person who's
never.
the patient or the person who has the substance use issue. It's everyone. And if our listeners can help their family members and friends understand, hey, can you walk alongside me in this? And as I ask for help, can you work on yourself? That would be great. Because that's the other answer that I feel like I have to work on myself, and not even just work, but joyfully take care of myself with absolutely radical self-care
It is
so that
radical.
I can be a
It is.
tall tree for them and show them, if I can't
Absolutely.
show them it's possible to live a life of contentment and vibrancy, how are they going to believe
They
that?
won't. They won't because they do take a lot from us. And
Mhm.
even as angry as they get at us for whatever we did or didn't do, they really deserve the chance of that. And they
Mhm.
deserve to have the life that they could, just to believe that
Mm.
it's possible to have.
Beautiful. So true, because nobody chooses this.
Nobody
Yeah.
says, "Hey, I want to be an addict when I grow up."
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
no one's doing show and tell for that.
So true. So we
And
have to have deep compassion that they didn't choose mental health issues. We didn't choose them for ourselves. They
no,
didn't choose to turn to substances. They didn't know. And so we all want to have such tremendous empathy that we can have better boundaries and change our
right.
structure and routines in our families. That's what I had to do, at least.
Well, of course. And, I never even understood what self love meant. I didn't
Mm,
really understand what that was about. But what I learned is that if you really if you're trying to self care and you don't self love, you can't self care.
hmm. So are you kind of saying, Tracy, that one feeds the other?
Yes,
Self-love
it
supports
does.
self-care, and it's
Yeah.
it's like a wheel.
It's a
Hmm.
wheel and it's a balance and it's a process. Nobody, I think self-love is just so new. The concept is so new and our
Hmm.
kids don't really understand it, because they're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
Hmm.
But if
Hmm.
we just keep doing it and they see the change in us, I mean, look, everything has changed. Everything, you look happy, you glow inside. Like it's a real transformation. It has
Hmm.
been for so many. And I've seen so many people through recovery have that huge transformation, like
So
me.
true. So true. And I'm thrilled for you. But yeah, you were talking about, did they get worse all at once? Did they
Yeah.
get worse
What
together?
was that like for them? Like, hey, they fed off each other. They were close in age.
They were, and it would seem like one person would kind of be doing poorly at one time, but we would do things like, I had a new boyfriend who is now my husband, within a year or two, within a year, I guess. And we would take them on hikes. We would take them cross country skiing because we wanted them to find other things to love. And we wanted to find things to do as a family.
Together.
We
Yeah.
started playing ping pong a ton together, having ping pong tournaments and just doing stuff that they loved. I'd ask them, what do you want to do? Because I really want to spend time with you. And that connection really helped us
All about connection.
to get through some of those tough times, and then they would start doing a little bit better. Sometimes it had nothing to do with me, but I would still ask and still try to spend time with them. But I feel like they both took paths that were different, and that was important for me to see,
Mm,
because as a mom, sometimes I wanted to believe, I guess I wanted to make it easier so that I could
of
figure it
course.
out. And I
Right.
wanted to think, okay, well, they both need this, they both need that, but they both needed really different things at certain times. One of them really likes to be alone. The other one is very extroverted. So I would have to just kind of hang out with my oldest who wanted to be alone and just kind of be alone with him and read with him. Whereas with my younger one who was extroverted, I'd want to, get him out so he could be with people and have the
Right.
connections.
And how different, like really, for both of them, like for
Yeah.
you, with having such different kids who were both struggling in substance and
Mhm.
addiction. So you have to like realize that like your ability to help them help themselves was different for each of them. You know, they were very
Mm.
different, but they had the same mom. So it was probably really hard for them to understand that, you know?
I think so. But another thing you're making me realize as you say that is that one of the ways I could role model for them is one of the chapters in my book, Conscious Bravery, and it's called Befriend Your Feelings.
I
And
saw that.
most people know about that, but really to make friends with all of our feelings, oh my gosh, for myself, it was such hard work because I had to say, okay, I'm feeling shame,
Yep.
guilt. And I had to say, all right, here I am. All right, you're welcome here, shame. And then I could role model, hey, I'm feeling anxious at the moment. I would even say that to my son so they could know that I knew, because labeling a feeling helps us to make friends with it, to say, hey, I'm anxious. It's not the end of the world. I can contain the discomfort of this anxious feeling. I can hold space for it and be kind
Yeah.
to it.
Well, you know what you're doing. You're talking about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
We're talking about it. It
Yes.
never has been talked about. And so how are these young adults that we have as children in their, you know, in their late 20s, how are these kids supposed to be able to do this? Like they need, you know, it's just so important for them to be successful, however that works in their on their journey. And so that they're, you know, they're not feeling as bad as they really do. And you say, hey, listen, give yourself a break. You're
Mhm.
gonna be fine. We
Mm.
all struggle in life and we struggle with however things happen in our lives and why we do things and make decisions. And you know, addiction is very easy to get lost in. It works for a lot of people because it's too hard, things are too hard. And so but if they know that they really can be successful and not and talk about how they feel and say, yeah, I'm having a really shitty day, I feel anxious, and you say, you know what, same, well, that's a whole different meaning to them. Now they're like, hey,
Mm.
I'm good. She feels like this, I'm good. And instead of saying, I'm not going to tell anyone I feel anxious because I'm ashamed. Well, you've just fixed that entire concept.
Love that. Love that. And also I love what you said about um today, like in this moment I'm anxious, it's not going to last forever. You kind of said you'll get through this. So the more we allow, for me as a therapist, the more I partner with my clients and help them see, okay, just by stating you're anxious and allowing it doesn't mean it's going to get bigger. Or if you say I'm angry, doesn't mean it's going to get bigger and we're going to rage all over the place.
Yeah,
Usually means we bring it down.
that's starts to go away.
Yeah.
And
And
you're like,
another
what
thing I
was I
really
so anxious?
appreciate, yes. Another thing I appreciate you saying in addition to about anxiety was about success, Tracy, because I started realizing success looks like so many different things. One time I laughingly said to my best friend, success for one of my sons right now means he's not homeless and he's not hanging out with homeless friends.
Score,
Yeah.
score.
I quit caring if they went to college or not because
Who
they needed to
cares?
figure out for themselves what they wanted, what brought happiness, what brought
Yes, and
pleasure.
conversations like this have to be out here because you
Yes.
need to say, oh my God, I'm not a loser because I didn't go to college. Or, oh my God, I'm going to find a girlfriend if I tell her that I work at Walmart. No one cares. Do you, be you. Being successful has so many different facets. And us as parents who, you know, like, as you know, like there were days where I didn't know if my son was going to be alive when I got home because it just was the way our lives were. And
Mm,
so, you know, so in any moms out there listening to this or anybody listening to this that really feels like they are shameful and they don't want to talk about any of their mental health or any of their struggles, like you can do all this. We are human and we deserve respect. It doesn't matter how you got here. It only
mhm,
matters that you can acknowledge being here, that
mhm,
you embrace being here, and that you have hope and drive to make it better. That's all you
mm.
need, really. That's it. And
That's really well said. I love it. And that reminds me of an approach that I've taught for a long time and is in the book too, that I call Now There's This. So whenever something shocking comes my way or devastating or something that just is overwhelming, I'll try to say to myself, hmm, now there's this.
Yeah.
And it's a new moment. And I'm allowing myself to breathe into this present moment that has arrived and is not going away just because I wish it weren't here. So avoidance isn't going to help me.
No.
Denial is not going to help me. And my brain will work more quickly in the prefrontal cortex if I'm able to kind of get out of the reptilian brain, the primal brain, and say, okay, I'm breathing consciously. Now there's this new moment. I'm going to be aware of my experience, be aware of what's going on in me, not just the situation or this other person, because we tend to sort of in our codependency, our healthy codependency, whatever, we want to
Yeah.
focus on the other person or the situation
Of course,
to
it's much
help
easier.
fix it.
Right.
But yeah, don't you find we get more wisdom when we say, okay, in my experience right now, I'm feeling this in my body. My thoughts are racing. My heart is saying, hey, don't trust this situation. Or maybe my intuition is saying, this situation will change. Let it unfold. Don't panic. Be grounded. So anyway, the now there's this approach helps me. Have you used something like that too?
That's how I live all the time,
Yeah.
because if you don't sort of identify the things that come into your life that you might find a struggle, they're going to be so much worse once you talk about it to even yourself. And that is real. And anyone listening to this who doesn't believe that if they actually say something out loud and give it physical matter, that it's not going to mean anything, it means everything, because then you identify with it and then you can surrender to it, own your feeling, and then let it go. You told yourself, hey, listen, this is how I feel today, and I'm not okay, but it will get okay. It always is okay. And I always say, and when my son was really struggling through the anxiety stage before he became an addict, I would always say to him, you won't die from anxiety. No matter how afraid you might be when it's happening, it won't kill you.
Mm.
And so you can always be rest assured that you're fine and that
I
it will
love that. That's so powerful. It sounds like you knew who you truly were. You weren't your circumstances or your situation.
that way.
Yeah, and I know that as well, and I hope our listeners will know you're not your situation. You're not the substance use. You're not, if you're walking alongside someone who struggles with mental health or substance issues, you're not just this situation, or you're not just the mom or the friend. We are who we are in a very deep level, as you and I were talking about earlier.
Yes.
We are our essence,
Yes.
and that never changes. And
Never.
it's so stable and stationary that we can count on that.
Absolutely. And even people and anyone listening to this that might say, well, I don't know what kind of person I could be walking alongside. Guess what? Every person that struggles in this area wants somebody walking alongside. They may
Mm,
say they don't, they may act like they don't, but I can promise you there's not 1 second that goes by that they don't want to be cared about. So,
mhm.
however long you can walk aside with them to whatever aspect that is, you have to continue to take those opportunities, and you can never really let that go. You really
Mm.
just can't give up.
So true, so powerful. Yeah, one time when one of my sons had chosen homelessness because he was just altered, might be called psychotic. I prefer to use the word altered
I like
because it's
altered
less laden with
with stigma.
stereotypes.
Yep.
Yeah, and stigma. But
Yep.
at any rate, he was altered and he'd been gone for about 2 weeks. He had just disappeared out of jail, no money. I was going to take him to treatment. We'd agreed on that, but he left the jail without me seeing. I was waiting out front. I don't know how he got by me, but he did. At any rate, had no money, only the clothes on his back, nothing, no phone, and had disappeared for 2 weeks. And finally on a Friday, Tracy, he called me.
How
And
awful
he
for you.
called me from a day homeless shelter in another city. And he said something really odd about the security commission. It took about 5 seconds, then he hung up. So I called that number back and found out where it was, hopped in my car, it was Denver, Colorado, about 75 miles from here. Got there just before they closed and he was already gone. Long story short, I looked through every homeless shelter that night that I could get near before it got too dark, and was escorted through one of them. Even the next day, my husband and I went up in two different cars And I just knew, I had this knowing I was going to see him because I had this sense that he'd called me for a reason, and he was reaching out for help, that he didn't want to be in that world alone.
Right.
And this is crazy. Denver is huge, as most of us know. But I just had this sense driving along in my own car that I was going to see him. And then the closer I got, I was in downtown Denver. I was on Broadway, and I just knew he's nearby. And I believe in this. You just
Oh,
have that
100%. That's,
synchronicity knowing,
oh
right?
yeah.
So I slow down, and sure enough, I see him on the sidewalk limping along. He was injured. And so I pull over, put my car in, put my flashers on, put my car in park, leave it running. And I walk over to him kind of slowly, and I said, honey, I love you. And all I wanted to do was offer him a meal or a shower at a hotel. I wasn't going to try to talk him into anything because I
Right.
knew better by then, to just that he had agency. He needed to make his own choice.
Right.
But he looked at me, and he had a wand, and he sort of cast a spell and ran the other way.
Wow.
But I knew in my heart, and we looked for him a little longer that day, but to no avail. But the thing is, to our listeners, I knew in my heart he wanted to know I cared, and that if he called, I would come.
That's right.
And a week later, he called me again, and then he decided to go to treatment. And so there's the happy ending. It didn't happen A to B to C to D, but
It never does.
I was not going to give up on him, and I was not going to give up hope, and just
Yeah.
still let him come when he was ready. So
Right.
that's the challenging thing, I think, for most of us parents and loved ones, is to let our loved ones know we're there,
Right.
and then come to us when they're
When they're
ready.
ready. And it's being patient. And as a parent,
Mm,
being so, we worry about their safety.
yes.
Um,
It's horrific.
that's sort of like a very hard concept, but
Hmm.
we also have to know that if we continue to clip our children's wings, they'll never learn to fly.
Mm,
And
so
I
true.
I did. I clipped my son's wings for too long, and he just
Mm,
never learned to fly. And then didn't have the skills he needed and
hmm.
to make those decisions. And I
Hmm.
think that that's really difficult for people to understand, that they need to give that life to their kids, even when they're making these terrible choices and awful mistakes and decisions, that they have to have those experiences, or they'll never be able to figure out life.
So true. And don't you find everybody talks about boundaries, but how do we set them? And how do we know, okay, I don't want to clip my son's wings or my daughter's wings, but how do I not? And so I have to turn to a belief system inside that says he has the same essence that
Hmm.
he's had since before birth. He can
Absolutely.
trust that. He's never alone. He's got inner wisdom. He's connected to something greater, God, the Tao, the universe,
Absolutely.
belongingness, whatever you want to call it.
All of
And
it
so
is,
he's being
yep.
guided, and he's connected to others. So I have this little triangle. I call it the triangle of connection, that we always have ourselves, our essence. We always have one another, because we're just kidding ourselves if we think we're alone. We're interconnected in the beautiful web.
Of course we
And then
are.
we always have something greater, the universe, God, source. And when we rely on one or two, it's not enough. It can kind of topple over. Or when we rely on just one end of the triangle. But when we turn to all three, we're more
You're solid.
stable and
You're solid.
grounded. Yeah.
And it's that
So
in the stability of, trying to create stability when you're living in this really stressful life of really not knowing what your children are doing, and how, are
mhm.
they coming home?
Right.
That, and that's a really hard thing. And you've really had more, it's just a lot to handle, especially on your own. And so you just have to hope that some of the things that you've shown them, that sticks. And I always know that, is that I showed so much compassion, commitment to helping, but basically just to be the person standing alongside the journey.
I love that. And I used to make mistakes like asking my sons, so are you going to a meeting? Do you have friends that are trustworthy? And I quit asking. I started just inviting them over, and would just make a meal for them, whether they were using or not. There was unconditional love.
They don't
And
want to
so,
tell you because
yeah.
they're
And
afraid of
I would buy
disappointment.
them gas if they were on their way to community service or to a job. I'd say, "Hey, I'll meet you and I'll put gas in your car," because I wanted to convey love and have that connection.
Right.
So doing things worked
Right.
better for me rather than asking questions,
And
which
I
would
think
alienate.
but the question game is, I think, back for our generation, then it's no longer being used.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we have to sort of retrain
Uh,
ourselves. Yes. We have to recondition our subconscious,
yes,
which you
so
know
true.
all about.
Oh, but it's beautiful that you're mentioning that because we have epigenetics. We can change ourselves, our environment, the
Everything.
interact. We can rewire our brains. And I've had to do that over and over. I'm still working on it now, clearly,
So
trying to
hard.
just listen, listen, listen. It's so
Yeah,
hard.
and read and everyone listen, this, her book is just it's like you're talking to a friend. Everything's
Mm,
very, very relatable and everything's very easy to see how it could work. So that, it's not complicated.
oh, thank
It's just
you.
very easy to understand and you don't feel like an idiot trying to figure it out. Like a lot of the books that you do try to, work with. And so that is,
Thank
and
you.
it's so rare, like what there isn't a lot out there with the same type of, vibe, what you did. And so I love that about you. And I think you're so amazing that you've taken some really shitty life and turned that into a really great message. And
Thank you so much. I wanted my book to be easy to read in street language rather than
it,
using therapies and
I
stuff like
love
that.
it.
And I wanted to add a few of my own stories so that people could see, okay, I've been in the trenches and I'm able to be vulnerable because that's what we
Great.
all need to do is be vulnerable and
Of
strong,
course.
and then apply these practices. So my book is very action oriented,
Yeah, it's
not
great.
just
And just be honest and truthful and not be afraid that you're going to say something about you yourself that it's going to be judged because none of us are being judged. We judge ourselves. We're
mm-hmm,
just like you say, our essence.
mm-hmm,
That's all the good, that's where the good shines and that's what keeps us connected.
mm-hmm, mm.
Well, let me tell you, I love you, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here.
Uh,
Really, honestly, I feel so lucky to have met you. I feel so lucky to have read from you. I think that you will help endless people. I mean, you're just really easy to talk to and lovely. And
Thank you so much.
your kids are very lucky to have such a wonderful mom,
Mm.
and it's a forever job, as we know.
What a beautiful thing to say. And your adult kids as well. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. So why don't you tell our audience where they can find your book and where they can find your website and so that they can, you're there if they need you.
Mm. Anyone can get my book on Amazon and it's in paperback as an ebook. And also I narrated it on Audible. And you can
Cool.
also find me on my website, which is PamelaBrinker.com, and my YouTube channel, which is Pamela Brinker, Be Brave on YouTube. So my book is all about conscious bravery and tools and concepts that are easy to apply one by one, little bit at a time.
A little bit of time. Well, it's great. And I think, anybody listening, I hope, this conversation helped you in any way. It certainly helped me because this has been able to talk about being a mom of a child that had an
Mm.
addiction, and I have yet to do that. So thank you for being here for me to
Mm.
share that with you. And I hope you'll come back and be on the show again.
Thank you so much. I'm
Uh,
really grateful. It's a joy to talk with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.